Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Courageous Conversations event brought to you by Chesterfield County Public Schools and the YMCA. I am Charlotte Dean, board member for the Chester Family YMCA and chair for tonight's event. Before we begin, we want to remind you that keeping in line with state and federal mandates, we are practicing social distancing, and all panelists will wear a mask until they answer a question. Tonight's discussion is centered around divisive discourse and its impact on our community, particularly our youth. Without question, 2020 has been a very polarizing year. So we wanted to have a discussion regarding how we can move forward and get to a place of healing. We have received excellent questions in advance for tonight's event from the community, and we really look forward to our local experts joining in on the conversation to give their perspective, their experience, and resources to help parents and guardians further this conversation in their own homes. Before we get into tonight's event further, I would like to introduce to you our panel of experts. Pastor Sean Franco with Cornerstone Assembly of God, who also serves on the Board of Social Services for Chesterfield County. Jennifer Rucker, Director of Equity and Student Support for Chesterfield County Schools. John Richardson Love, Director of Trauma and Resilience Education and Mental Health with Child Savers. Pastor David Taylor with Signs and Wonders Ministry. Betsy Peters, Senior Vice President of Youth Development for the YMCA of Greater Richmond, and Caden Hunter, a member of the YMCA Leaders Club. Thank you all for taking time out of your busy schedules to join us for tonight's very important discussion. So let's begin. Jennifer Rucker, I'm going to start with you if you don't mind. Our youth are coping with a lot this year. So can you tell us what Chesterfield County Schools is doing to support students, and how does social emotional learning support healing and finding common ground?
Yes, so we have, since March, since our closure, we have made sure that we are providing support to our students in various ways. We have a very robust social emotional learning group within central office, but we also have boots on the ground with our school counselors, our school psychologists, and social workers that are trained in mental health. So we provide opportunities for students through advisory periods for our secondary students, which is a block of time where teachers can speak with students and talk about social emotional issues, as well as a social and emotional learning curriculum at our elementary level. So it's already embedded in there every day. But on top of that, we also have mental health support specialists, behavioral intervention specialists, as well as our trauma-informed care and social emotional learning coordinators, who actually are here to make sure that our students have what they need. So although we are focused on instruction, we are definitely taking strides to make sure that we are supporting our students' social and emotional needs. So we say Maslow before Bloom. And we have been coining that phrase since our state superintendent had said it in March, basically giving our students grace in regards to where they are in their lives, understanding their lives have been shaken up quite a bit because a lot of their social well-being is in schools. But then also making sure that we are capturing how they're doing throughout this time in a manner that we are not assuming that they're okay. If we go into it assuming that they're not okay, then they know that we're there for them. I hope they know that we're there for them. In addition to that, we make sure that we're speaking with principals quite often. We have a student well-being survey that's going out, and we're asking all of our teachers to make sure that they are taking that survey when they're touching base with students. And we're asking our secondary students to actually tell us how they're doing through the survey. So we're capturing data from all of our students and our teachers. Dr. Daugherty back in March said we have to make sure that our kids are okay, so teachers need to call and schools need to find a way to connect with kids every week. So that is also happening as well. So there's a lot of balls in the air, but definitely no one magic one. Yeah. But we do work with families. We ask parents to call us if things are not going well. We also have Gaggle support, which is an online Google Drive Big Brother type thing. I have to say technology support to ensure that our kids are safe online. And so we have 365 days, 24/7 surveillance over that tool, that instructional tool to make sure our kids are okay. And we'll call in the middle of the night if they're not.
Excellent, excellent. So Jennifer, I'm going to pivot this question back to you, and then John, I'll go to you. I actually read a report today that highlighted that teens are really feeling disconnected today, maybe now more so than ever. What do you believe are the signs that parents can look for in their children and guardians can look for as well? And why do you think teens in particular are feeling so vulnerable?
I think they're feeling vulnerable. I'll get to the signs later. I think they're feeling vulnerable because they don't have a place to say what they want to say. You know, in homes, I think, and maybe not all homes, I'm not assuming that all homes are this way, but when kids come into school, they're a different type of kid. As a former principal, I always noted when I saw my kids in the car with their parents versus when they walked in the door, and it was a little different, and I allowed them to be a little different to a point. But they felt more free, and they could speak more openly, and our teachers, who are excellent, provided an opportunity for them to be critical thinkers and to challenge one another with their peers. Now, if they're in a home isolated by themselves or not with someone of their age, there's a possibility they're not engaging in those types of conversations. We have our students who are on technology a lot, so they're using, they're using their words through text, and they're not able to convey that and express themselves openly. So I think that they're feeling isolated, and again, this is an assumption. Some may feel that that's a freedom to use their cell phones, but I do know that when you walk into a school pre-COVID, and you see the interactions, and you see the cafeteria playing around, the kids playing around, there is a sense of joy and an excitement and an ability to communicate unlike anything else that we've seen. And so I think that that's why they're feeling vulnerable, and signs for parents, what can they see of their child? That could be a sign that they're isolated and feeling kind of alone. I would say that if they're not talking to you. Now, I have a daughter. I actually met her when she was in middle school. She's my stepdaughter, and I saw that transition, but I frequently visited her bedroom. How are you? What's going on? Why is your door closed? Come and eat. Sit with me. Let's eat together. My phone's away. Your phone's away. Looking her in the eye. Still to this day at 23, I do that because I want to make sure I'm connecting with her, which means I have to prepare myself and put my phone away so that I can connect with that child. And I think if parents don't intentionally do that, then they're missing it, because the phone is a place where you can go into a rabbit hole onto sites and things that you're not on as an adult. And that child can get into a very lost space. So it's really important to monitor the phone. I know that our Verizon and T-Mobile and all of them have features to do that. And it's also important to look your child in the face and say, how are you doing?
Excellent. John, you have anything to add to that?
Yes, Jennifer, I love what you were saying there. One of the biggest things that we do talk about when we're talking about parenting skills is nose and toes facing each other and put the phone down. That's one of the best steps that a parent can do. As human beings, we're built for connection. We're hardwired for connection, whether you're an introvert or an extrovert. We need those connections in our lives. And teenagers are at a specific developmental timeline, spot in their life where they're trying to, what we talk about individuating, finding out who I am, differentiating, finding that I'm not my parent. I'm somebody else. I'm somebody, my own person. And kids really strive to do that. And one of the ways they do that is through their peer group. And being connected. Regardless of the schooling situation and the home situation, everybody is living a different life than they were a year ago. So the hunger for that connection is met by the barriers and lack of that reciprocity, that feedback, that interaction with a peer group, with other individuals, where I need to figure out, where I can use those interactions to figure out what I can do. So it's not just quantity of relationship, it's quality of relationship, which is one of the detriments of social media, unfortunately, that the quality of relationship isn't always there. So in terms of signs that parents and caregivers can look for, I think it's about the meaningful connections. It's about being able to have those rich and robust, deep, meaningful connections in their lives, which can certainly be done between two 14-year-olds. People don't have to be adults to have those kind of quality relationships. Kids need to have meaningful relationships with adults as well, whether that's a parent or caregiver, or whether that's a role model or a mentor. Kids really need that. They hunger for that. They need somebody to be able to set those boundaries as well as give them freedom, which is a hard balance that all of us as parents and caregivers have to strike. In terms of other signs that we can look for, definitely we can look for signs of anxiety and depression, things like that, changes in mood and routines, withdrawal, social isolation, things like that, which is something that all of us have had to deal with in one form or another. But those, but a lot of times it's also about just trusting your gut as a parent or caregiver, knowing that hopefully whether we met our child at birth or whether we met our child when they were 14 or whenever, that we as parents are blessed with a gut that allows us to be able to be intuitive with the work that we do with our kids. So, and asking for help, reaching out when we need it.
Great, asking for help. Pastor Frank, I believe you have like to add to that?
Yeah, I would also mention, I would also think about the issue of diversity of relationship. One of the gifts of our public school, and I'm on. We're good now? All right. One of the gifts of our public school, one of the gifts of the YMCA and our community organizations is it puts us into contact with people who are not like us. And that's a very healthy thing. Now, with the challenges of quarantine, we're in a position where we're left more to technology to create our relationship, and the algorithms and systems in our social media actually tend to reinforce what we already know and who we already are. And so I think one of the thoughts about this as we're mentioning the need of the parent in all of this is that I think one of the signs of a healthy child is the diversity of relationships they're in. And so I think even as a household, in whatever form as an adult we have the ability to help a child around us, is trying to introduce them to healthy, diverse relationships. We've mentioned generation, adult to peer. And, obviously with the pandemic, that's more of a challenge, and we're left to a device that tends to keep reinforcing what we already think and know. And so I think just that idea of recognizing that we're in a society and a community dynamic right now that really is taking away some of the diversity that is so healthy for us. And that's why you go to you show up at lunch, and sure, you've got your peer group, but that's not all you're interacting with, and you are in a situation in which you have to discover how to do that. And, I think that's one of the things that's a challenge right now, and I think if we can, as the adults in students' lives, try to be more intentional about leveraging our relationships or recognizing the lack of diversity in our own relationships, and begin to, in very practical ways, just bring that diversity of relationship back to our students. I think that's going to ease a lot of tension and take away a lot of the typical snares of divisiveness in our community.
I like what you said about having healthy and diverse relationships. So that leads us back to having healthy and diverse conversations. Anyone who wants to answer this next question, please do so. But how do you see divisive rhetoric that we see right now in our society having a major impact on our youth? John, I'll pick on you first.
I think when we have divisive and I'll even say hostile rhetoric, I think one of the biggest things that it does is it gives our youth permission to do the same. That we're not confronting the reality of things that are unacceptable, of things that are unhealthy. We need to do that. We need to actively separate ourselves from things that are negative and unhealthy. And when we as parents and caregivers don't role model those healthy choices, we tell our kids to, turn the TV off, or don't follow that person on social media, or, spend less time on your phone, things like that. But then we as parents and caregivers might be role modeling in the same way that we aren't do what I say, not what I do. So we have to be able to call that out when it's there. We have to be willing to put ourselves out there to be role models for our kids, because we all deserve and have the right to be in safe and welcoming spaces, whether that's online or whether that's in person. We all have the right to be cared about, and those are the opposite of what we're talking about tonight, unfortunately, with the negative and unhealthy rhetoric.
Jennifer?
Yeah, I would think that it causes great confusion. It causes confusion because it's not how children are raised. Even when they come to school, regardless of what's happening at home, in school, because that's the perspective I'm providing, we learn the golden rule, we learn to be kind, we learn kindness matters, We learn what respect is. Character ed is very important in elementary and goes all the way up. So it's confusing, I would think, and disappointing and hurtful to see it and it's not called out, because kids, children, youth are constantly called out and redirected. Constantly. I know you're like, yes, there's always somebody calling me out and telling me what I'm doing wrong, but how can you do it? But I'm not supposed to do it. And so I think it could cause confusion. I know it has for some youth that I know, and you have to talk through that a little bit. And I think it's hurtful, and they don't know, they may know what to do with it, and they may not know what to do with it. And I think that it is quite concerning, because that means that they're internalizing. And when you internalize that hurt and confusion, you're not able to speak about it. We don't know what the damage could be, not just for when we get, out of this pandemic, but what happens when they return into a space where they're with people who are different than them, or they remember the comment that someone wrote and now they're seeing that person. What do they do then? They're confused, because now we're back in the normal and we're supposed to be respectful again. So it's quite confusing.
Betsy?
One thing that we've really seen too is just that early access to information. It gets younger and younger from social media, that these children, especially now with so much is virtual. And I love what Jennifer said, that children are different when they're with their parents from when they get out of the car. And I can count just numerous times we've had conversations with parents, and they're like, my child said that? How did they know that information? And so it is confusing, but yet the peer-to-peer, when they have these conversations, that no matter what age, when the information comes out, it's our opportunity to solve it and to redirect, because they just learn too young now.
So Betsy, let's add to that. Children, as you said, they learn from the adults and the caregivers in their lives. So if they're imitating positively or negatively, how can we make sure that our youth are learning to have productive conversations and learn from each other, whether you have a difference of opinion or not?
Going back, one thing that we've incorporated in our programs is the Stanford Harmony, which is emotional learning, and it is amazing what these kids can come up with and the conversations that they can have towards one another, and how about their feelings and things. And I think we just have that opportunity to continuously redirect and not shy away from conversations. We've taken advantage of John's training that he does, because our staff needs to be trained in trauma-informed care and know how to have those conversations with students and how to redirect and how to listen. And the other day we were in a meeting, and John said something that I loved. He said, it's our job to come alongside them and seek to understand, and that's what we need to do at the Y. And so the training that we have with the staff, the opportunities with our teens, I think is really incredible, because these teens are passionate about what the world's going to be for them, and they want to learn, and they want to make the world a better place, and they see the impact that it's having on their lives, even in middle and high school. And so to set up safe places for them where they feel like they can have free conversations so that they can learn and educate one another and learn how to respect each other's opinions is definitely key in everything that we do.
Do you think that sometimes children are better at that than adults can be?
Oh, by all means. They have no filters. And I say sometimes if parents could focus in at school or the Y or any place where their child is being entertained and watched by somebody else, they would be surprised at how their child mimics some of the things that they say, and questions come up. And so it is important. And I think that's what's so important at the Y. We don't need to shy away from that and don't act surprised. We just need to come alongside and help educate and help teach so that we can get the children where they need to be.
Excellent.
Can I chime in on that?
Please.
Just a metaphor. I think that being role models is a big thing there, and giving kids freedom enough to do that. The metaphor that I always think about is bowling with bumpers. That we need to give kids the opportunity to throw the ball down the lane, but you might want to put the bumpers up. You might want to put a little guardrails there so that you can provide a little bit of containment, a little bit of structure, so that kids don't end up 3 lanes over in the bowling alley. So it's a good way that I like to think about that, the necessity of the balance of freedom versus limits.
Okay. And Betsy talked about the trauma-informed care that you do with Child Savers. If people aren't familiar with that, can you kind of give a highlight of what that is and how you help organizations like the YMCA?
In 30 seconds.
Yes.
So trauma-informed care acknowledges that everyone has their story. Make sure that we're responding to the need that's behind behavior rather than just reacting to behavior. A good way to think about that is, how many kids get suspended from within a school district in a given year, typically, at least pre-COVID, and how many of those kids come back from a suspension with better behavior? The suspension is intended to control behavior and manage behavior, yet it doesn't do a good job because it's not responding to the need, the social emotional deficit, whatever that is, the community issue that might be behind that behavior. So that we have to realize that everyone has a story. We're all made up of our story. We never get to erase part of our story, part of our history. And we have to understand that who I am is an individual, so we have to make sure that we honor that we ask the question, what happened to you, instead of what's wrong with you. Again, knowing that everyone has their story, and then responding in individual ways. My goal, if I was king of the world, would be that every kid should have an individualized education plan, because every kid is an individual and needs that. And that's one of the things that trauma-informed care and resiliency-based practices really focuses on.
Pastor Franco.
Yeah, I think this idea of modeling is so important. And, we've lost the ability to listen and learn. So let's take example, our viewers right now who are watching us. There's kind of two ways to go about watching. There's the attempt to find what's wrong or if your opinion is validated, or it's to listen and learn something that then we can model for our children. I learned something today. I listened in that panel, and although I didn't agree with this, what they said about this was really important. And it kind of struck me that maybe I've been thinking about that wrong. And so I just think there's, again, for the adults in these students' lives, we sometimes are looking for macro solutions when we've got the direct relationship, and we're underestimating the power for us to model a learning posture and a listening posture, to ask a question instead of to move to what we believe is correct. And if you look at the way that most people are consuming social media, it's not to listen and learn. It's to find out if what they already believe someone's going to echo. And so I think one of those modeling principles that would be wonderful, and you can do it because you're watching tonight, is to go back either with your child who's watching with you today or that student that's with you, and mention something as you were listening that you learned. And I think that begins to bring a different attitude to the way we look at divisive issues and things that are difficult. And in that, we can begin to show those around us listening and learning instead of really looking for the first thing that offends us.
I like that. Listen first. Pastor Taylor?
Yes, I was listening to Sean and to Jennifer and to Betsy as it relates to the importance of modeling and representing the faith community here. I thought about the prophet Isaiah, and he mentioned in the first chapter that for us to let us come together and reason, or let us come together and communicate. Let us come together and understand the differences that each individual may have. So if we're going to model that, we have to make sure that we as adults, parents, guardians, whomever that's in a leadership position, to model that, to make sure that everyone feel respected. I think that's one thing that's lost in communicating. And I think negative rhetoric is a result from sometimes individuals not feeling like they are being heard. So we have two conflicting issues. And instead of coming in the middle and to empathize or to understand what each other is thinking, we go to our own corners and we throw out all these negative rhetorics to kind of justify our points rather than coming together. So I believe that if we learn and model more in our communities, in our homes, in our schools, in our place of employment, what it looks like to reason, then that can be a healing mechanism that can be watched our youth can watch us do, and then hopefully perpetuate that for generations and generations to come.
Pastor Taylor, you bring up a great point. As we know that words, whether they're said in person or on social media, they can hurt and they can have a long-lasting impact. Do you think we can actually get back to respectful engagement with each other?
I am very optimistic, Charlotte, that we can do that. Because as we begin to look and monitor what are the results to not doing that, it should give all of us an appetite to say, hey, if this kind of negative rhetoric and negative interaction is taking us down this road. Okay, thank you. I'm sorry. So I'm optimistic about that because I think the question is, if we don't, what would be the results of us continuing on this path? This path is bringing more divisiveness, more hatred, more anger. So I think that internally inside of all of us, there is this desire to be at peace with one another and to be at peace as a community. So I think that hunger and desire is going to be the mechanism that say, hey, enough is enough. And I think this conversation tonight is a byproduct of many individuals. We are here as individuals, but we are representation of many, if not thousands and millions of people that are saying, hey, enough is enough. Let's come up with another way of handling this issue so that we all can live peacefully with one another and perpetuate a generation of change.
Yes, please.
I think, and I'm hopeful as well. I'm not naive, but I'm very hopeful. It's just how I was raised. But I will say that I know parents, regardless of what your beliefs are, what your background is, every parent, me being one, knows that they want better for their child. And when you want better for your children, you will model what it is that you want them to do because you want a better life for them, regardless of how great your life is right now. One of the things I've noticed in all that's happening is that a lot of what's happening has just been, there's a spotlight on it because we're paused. A lot of what's happening has been happening for quite a while, but we have a little bit more time now to say it. As a black woman, I can say a lot of this has been happening for quite some time, and I've been a recipient of a lot of it. But hurt people hurt people. And there's obviously a lot of hurt people out there who feel as if they want other people to feel the way they do. And so, just like Pastor said, you know, being respectful of each other, and I've said this in a previous town hall that we were in, you know, you don't have to like me, but you must respect who I am. I don't need you to say hi, but I definitely don't need you to curse me out on social media or to my face. And I need to make sure that my children are safe. And if we as a community can't come together and understand just that so that we can have a better life for our children, then what's the point of it all? So again, regardless of where you come from in your life and whatever life you like, you know, walk of life you've had, you want better for your children. And so we've got to come together. Enough is enough. Don't like me, but my kid's going to school with your kid. They're going to play on the same team. They're going to dab it up at the end. They may go to prom together. And that's what we want. We want a community where we feel safe and valued, but I don't need to come to your cookout. It's okay. And I think we just need to get back to that place. Again, this is just a spotlight on two pandemics that have occurred in our life, in our time in 2020. The racial unrest and COVID. And we've got to figure out a way to, the norm, going back to the norm, I don't know what that means, but I do know that we've got to make sure we do better for our children because they're watching us every single day. And these are going to be the people who are going to roll us around in the nursing homes. So we got to make sure we're taking care of them.
Pastor Franco?
Yeah, I think there's an interesting tension that we can be deceived in finding a wrong solution for, and that's this. That issue of longing for peace and longing for better for our children makes us passionate for the injustices we see around us. And so knowing that it's gone on too long and that there are reforms on every level that need to happen, the cry for justice sometimes leads us to act very unjustly in how we dialogue and what we assume about others. Ironic, right? And so, again, from the faith perspective, in my congregation, the one verse I always tell our people is Micah 6:8. And it goes like this. It says, "He has told you, O man, what is good. And what does the Lord require of you? To do justice, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with your God." And my point is always this. If you want justice to happen, you've got to have mercy.
Excellent.
Because what is glaringly obvious to me about the injustice around me, and I think John, I love that thought that John said about trauma-informed care, recognizes that people have a story. And this issue that what's glaringly obvious to me about injustice, if I do not have mercy upon the person near me who does not see it or understand it, they will never have the opportunity to do justice with me. But what is necessary is for me to say, okay, here's this, and again from the faith perspective, I'm to do justice, but I've got to love mercy. So I've got to be able to say, as passionate I am, I've got to have mercy on someone who does not understand what I understand. And in that, have the mercy to share my story, to listen to their story. And then the beautiful thing is, in the end, I have someone who can do justice with me now. But we live in a society that basically has said, enough with mercy. We've had mercy too long. It hasn't gotten us any place. And while the correct term is, yes, we haven't acted and we haven't done what we should do, we've got to learn to have mercy that the other person doesn't understand our story. And again, and that's happening a lot on social media. So lots of labels, lots of generalizations, lots of saying things about categories of people. And in that, we are breaking down the opportunity to share more personally, and with that, have mercy and bring people together. So that issue of having mercy so that justice can happen can lead to not divisive conversations, but more reconciling ones. And so that's really my heart, because that issue of let's look at our children's future. I'm finding often that cry for justice is somehow putting us in a place of unjust conversations.
Excellent. All right, you open up Pandora's box of social media, so I'm going to take it. Some of the things we hear in the news and we read on social media may have been considered rude in times past. But nowadays, some of those same statements, they garner a lot of likes and a lot of attention on social media. Do you think we're unable to be civil and show respect in our conversations? And if so, how do we get back to that? John, I'll start with you first.
I think that just because it's accepted doesn't mean it's not rude or not still rude. I think, unfortunately, sometimes these days we celebrate the rude, as opposed to, as I was saying before, that we need to call it out. We need to call it what it is, and decide if we want to be in a space like that. It's reframe the question. I think I got a little lost in my thoughts there.
Okay, so the negative rhetoric that we're seeing right now on social media and in the news, how are we able to get back to being civil and be respectful, whether it's you're commenting on someone's social media post or you're having a conversation with them about a political discussion in person?
Yeah. It's a lot easier within our families than outside of our families, because as we talked about before, we can be role models for our kids. We can talk about what's acceptable and what's not, but there's so much that's outside of our control. As you were saying, Jennifer, about what somebody might say to you over social media or curse you out over social media, things like that, which isn't fair, which isn't just, and sometimes might be celebrated by a certain faction of people who want to rally around and celebrate the injustice of that, unfortunately. I think what we need to do is, again, decide what spaces we want to be in. We have the opportunity to put ourselves out there or not, to be in those spaces or not. If I'm in the grocery store, I have a limit in terms of how much I have control over what people are going to shout at me. But I can decide who my Facebook friends are. I can decide what social media interactions I have. And that might mean that I don't have the freedom to be everywhere that I might otherwise want to be, that if I'm in some public space, whether that's physical or online, I can decide to pull back from that and decide to not be in there, and that's okay.
Do you think, I'll follow up with you, John, do you think sometimes people have it's hard for them to hit the pause button if they create a social media post, someone responds negatively to it, and the person you want to attack? How do we get to that pause button of saying, okay, they had a difference of opinion, it's okay, move on?
There's a couple different things that we can do with that. One is we have to be filled up by things outside of that social media. We have to have positive influences that we do have some control over, some moderation over, and feel like we have some sense of good old unconditional positive regard, that we have people who accept us, that we're in spaces that are friendly to us, that are those safe and healthy spaces. So if I have that in my life, then I'm not going to hunger as much for those Instagram likes, for that positive affirmation. I think studies show that people get the core of their being has a lot more, feels the impact much more of the negative stuff on social media, particularly that's directed towards them, than the positives. That Jennifer may not, and I hope this hasn't happened to you, but you mentioned the kind of, having someone use profanity towards you on social media. You might feel the sting of that one interaction a whole lot more than the sting of the 100 positive things that were said to you or those positive interactions. And that's just what we are as humans, what we do as humans. It's we feel that more to our core, and we feel like that's about our identity. And we have to reconcile that my Facebook profile or my Instagram feed is not my identity, that we have to be much more than that, which means, going to Pastor Franco's comments earlier, we need diversity of relationships. I need to be fed in so many different ways. But if all my identity is my social media profile, then quite frankly, I think I'm living a pretty sad life. I need more robust enrichment and diversity.
Betsy.
So when I think about that with youth, I think one thing that really worries me is so many youth are able to hide behind their social media. Their parents don't even know what accounts they have happening on there. And I think so much of it is interpretation as opposed to being able to hear somebody's voice and hear somebody's words. And so how do we circle back around to teach that staff when sometimes we don't, or those youth, when we don't even know about it and when their parents don't know about it? And so I think that gives me a little bit, I have hope. I always have hope. I'm very optimistic, but it also gives me fear when it's so easy to hide behind that social media profile for our younger generation.
Kate, and I'd like to get the youth perspective from you if you don't mind. Kids your age, how concerned are they about social media bullying? And if so, how do they handle it?
Give me 1 second. Their concern is more internal. When I have not been personally attacked, but I know people that have, it can take a very big toll on their mind, especially if they don't have a good household or a nice group of friends to talk to about it. It can be very hard for them to handle, and it can affect their personality or how they act towards each other, which could cause more problems, mainly at school, especially if it's someone that goes to your school that's attacking you. It could cause problems between you and that person, or you and the few people that you do talk to. It could start fights between your friends and their friends, and it can just cause a lot of problems.
Pastor Taylor, do you have something to add?
I was just listening to the first part of your questioning as it relates to how does it seemingly that we get better responses from negativity than we do from things that are positive. I'm on Facebook, and I have noticed that, and I've asked myself the question, why does that happen? And as I thought about that, I was thinking about the Apostle Paul. He mentioned that there is a war going on inside of his members, inside of his body, or his entity. And he goes on to say, when I wanted to do right, I did wrong because all this evil is around me. So I think that we have to understand and be totally honest and blunt with ourselves and say within all of us is this tendency to be negative. And then it comes to a point that we have to work on our own selves to become more positive. We are imperfect beings. As much as we might want to say that, we are 100% positive and we're always thinking the right things, the reality is, and throw tomatoes at me if I'm saying something wrong, but the reality is that we all have sinned. We all have come short, so which means that we are imperfect. So when we realize that, I think that as we try to fix those things, it takes some pressure off, because if we make it seem as though this is our youth is in the worst condition they ever could be in, we are in the worst condition we could ever be in, then it kind of stops us from trying to fix it. It's almost like it's finite. I can't do anything about it. Where did this come from? Well, it's almost like it's in us. And then we have to do the necessary work to build ourselves out of that, and then hopefully bring somebody along with us.
Jennifer, I'm going to go back to you. What do you think there are ways that adults can teach teens like Caden about interacting on social media? And are there any resources available to help parents and caregivers?
Well, social media. I actually had a session with my parents when I was a principal on social media and hiding the apps behind the icons that really weren't what they were. It's fascinating if you kind of go down that rabbit hole of social media. In regards to parents helping their kids, I think it's just a matter of being aware and being tech savvy. You've got to kind of know what's out there in order to guide your child through the process. I have friends that have kids in 6th grade. When do I give them a cell phone? Let's talk about that. What are those responsibilities that you have to have when you have the phone? Taking the phone away from your child at nighttime, plugging it up beside your bed as a parent, making sure, again, that it's down at dinner time or at meal time, and just making sure that you're sharing social media sites with them. I have a lot of friends who are actually friends with their children on Instagram, and they're talking to them about those things. Again, we have to give our kids grace, as you said with the bumpers you have to give them grace to stumble through some things, but be there to catch them. You can't say no, because that's their livelihood right now. They're isolated. We cannot say no to social media for our youth. That is just wrong, especially if they're of an age where they are all alone in a space at home and they don't have anyone of their age group. But it is really important for parents to make sure that they are helping their child be healthy kids on social media. And there's a way to do that. And if parents, if some parents don't know how to do that themselves, that's going to be a troubling thing. I think that's the clincher there is, when we used to go out to eat, we would see kids and families sitting at mealtime and everybody had their device. And my husband and I would chuckle. We're like, they're not talking. Like the whole family's at IHOP and they're not talking. And so just catching yourself and making sure that you do toe-to-toe, face-to-face, and looking at the kid and talking. So I think there's opportunities for parents to continue to be learners, as you said earlier, just continue to learn and engage, grow with your child to make sure that you know all that they know. And also remember that you can take the phone. You can actually take it away. We did that with my stepdaughter at 16. It was not great, but she's a better woman because of it.
Pastor
Yeah.
Franco and then John.
John, you can follow up. Then I'll
Okay, thank you. So I think one thing that I tell parents a lot is you're selling yourself short if the kid owns the phone. It's my phone that you're using, then that means I'm not taking something that's yours, I'm taking something that's mine back. I think it's also really important to note that there's no universal solutions because every kid's going to be different. And kids need different things. Some kids need to be much more the rebel, and they need something to rebel against. And if you say I can't do it, then that's exactly what I'm going to do. And some kids we can work with early on. I love seeing beautiful family relationships where they engage in open, trustworthy, honest conversations early on about these things. And then you get the 12, 13, 14-year-old who, when you walk in their bedroom or when they're messing with their phone or whatever, they don't do the hidey thing. Some kids are just innately going to do the hidey thing because they feel like, someone is intruding upon their space. And then some families or kids don't do that and yeah, you want to look at my phone? Go ahead, look at whatever you want. I don't have anything bad on there, or if I do, we'll talk about it. So I think it's important to individualize that for different kids and know that we can't look up a checklist of the 10 things that we're supposed to do and apply them to every kid.
Yeah. And hopefully I think we can emphasize here and celebrate the power of a caring adult in a child's life. We have the power to teach them a yes just as much as we teach them a no. And so I think sometimes we've kind of, whether the model we had growing up, the adults in our life, or just for whatever reason, we've kind of forgotten that the role of either a parent, a caregiver, a mentor, our greatest power is to teach a younger person a yes in their life. Because if we instill in them a healthy yes, we're going to have a lot easier time with the no's. But if, I've got 4 children and an 8th grader right now who, I'm pretty busy trying to manage what is not normal anymore, and yet there was an opportunity to coach soccer for my son. And I looked at my calendar and said, there's no way I have time to do this. And then I did it. Because that's a healthy yes. And so obviously, the heroic nature of a lot of our caregivers that just do so much to make ends meet. We've got to applaud that, appreciate that, and then encourage you, build your network. Get involved at the Y. See what's going on at school. You're not alone in helping the child that you're caring for find a yes. Find something that because they've got a direction, it's easier to say no to the alleys and the dark paths that are around them. And, I think we're so used to consuming our media that without realizing it, as adults, we've taken on a victim mentality in which all we can do is complain about how powerless we are. And I think we've got to recognize that, whether it's from your faith background, whether it's from, a bunch of different sources, we have power to affect good. And we should not look at the macro problems and then stop doing what we can do in the micro sense. And so again, I think part of this conversation, and that was always for us having the ability to put the extra time in, was let's make home the best place we can. The rule in our house is show me your friends, I'll show you your future. So we're going to do everything we can as the adult in our child's life and in members of our church's child's life. We're going to do whatever we can to put good friends around them and pay a little extra money and change our schedule. But again, I think part of this is teaching the power of the yes. And so I've got an idea for everybody who's watching. Obviously, one of the first one is a way you can really change the course of what's going on is just by the end of this panel telling your child, here's what I learned today. This was a new thought for me. That's a great modeling moment. Here's a great question for you. So who or what are you for? Who are you for? What are you for? Because it's very easy to figure out who we're against. But what are we for? And that takes a little intentionality to figure out who we're for, what we're for. Is there a family value of courage, of kindness, of generosity? Are we for our neighbor across the street? I think learning to begin to have some conversations that talk about the yes in our kids' lives. Who are we for? What do we stand for? I think that then becomes a guiding mechanism for, so why do we get on social media? Or what do we do with our phone? Because we're definitely big, the phone does not go to bed with our child. That's definitely not happening. So I just think that idea of, again, for all the adults, and I know so many of our, in so many heroic ways, are doing so much already, I just want to encourage you, don't you feel like a victim. You've got a community that wants to be with you. And with that community, let's help our kids find a yes. And that's going to do half the work for us.
Excellent, excellent. Jennifer, you touched on this a little bit earlier, and you said how limiting social media exposure, it may not be enough. So again, how can parents and caregivers give youth context regarding interacting with negative rhetoric on social media?
Well, first, and I was thinking about responding to that earlier when you spoke about negative rhetoric, because first, I'm always the glass is half full and half empty. Take the rose-colored glasses off. A lot of people don't think it's negative. So let's just be aware that there are people who don't think what the negative rhetoric that we're calling is negative. But getting kids to, having parents talk to kids about it, it's a challenge because we're in a bad place. You know, when you have unemployment, when you're trying to figure out how to feed your kids, when your children can't go to school the way you want them to, when they're sad and you don't know what to do, I extend grace to understand where people are, meet them where they are, and allow them to feel that. I think one thing that we haven't tried to do is feel it, because the pandemic has locked us down, so we can't go golfing. We can't go we can't go hang out with our friends. We can't distract ourselves. So we're in a bubble, and sometimes that bubble wasn't good to begin with. And now the bubble is really bad because I can't distract myself. And so I feel bad. I mean, there is a sense of empathy that I have that even though the world seems to not acknowledge that they are empathetic, there's a level of empathy that I have for people who just don't know how to cope. There's coping skills that parents need to have to help their kids. And that's why I'm positive that we're going to see a change soon, because I know that everyone isn't in this place because they want to be. And so they only go to their phone because that's all they've got as an escape. And then they like the things that are negative because they feel bad. And so then it turns into where we are right now. I don't know really a solution as to help for a parent to help a kid, other than understanding where you are in your life right now, and knowing that if it's not a good place, and what you don't want, if you don't want this for your child, then you've got to find a way to get out of it. You've got to either put that phone down, phone a friend, something, because you can't do this to your children. And children need to see that resilience in parents, and I know we ask a lot of them. I know we do. But we've got to be resilient as parents to help our children be resilient to get through this. And so there's no magic wand. There's no resource that can help anyone in a pandemic get off of social media. I know it's an addiction, just like anything else, but it is sometimes the only escape. We just hope and pray that our parents understand where they are in this time, and let their kids know that we can get out of it together.
And if I could just echo there, and again, using this forum not just to talk about ideas, but to encourage and to offer some, some action, is some of the times the greatest thing we do is just admit we've got to keep moving forward. We've got to keep fighting. And so just for all those who are watching tonight, maybe you're in that place where it's just feeling overwhelming. And I just don't know what to do. And I see some of the problems, but I'm worn out. I'm tired. I'm not getting a lot of support around me. I mean, if we could just encourage you tonight to reach out, because that's why this is here. That's why, whether our churches, our community centers, our schools, all of my kids have done Chesterfield County Schools. And I tell you what, there's a school system that wants to help and wants to make a difference. And so I just want to encourage you. Sometimes I think, my analogy is sometimes as parents we think we're the chef when really we're just the waiter. Now, I particularly do this from the faith background, knowing that I've got God to turn to in this. But, a waiter, he doesn't take an order and had like a steak and say, oh, let me get it, it's in my pocket. No, what the waiter does is take the request and go to where the answer can be fulfilled and then bring it. And I think parents, don't forget, no one's asking you to be perfect. And even in the things that you feel like you failed at, the attempt to heal and recover is a great example. And you be that waiter. Be the one to see the need, the hunger in your kid, and you don't have to have the answer in your pocket. Learn to go to people in your community and find that answer, and just take some. And you could comment in this form right now if there's a particular need or a way that you would like to find some help. And there'll be people here on this, watching these comments that would direct you to resources. So just want to encourage you that that really just taking a step is an incredible gift to your child, but just by willing to say, I don't know, and I need to try.
Yes, Pastor Taylor.
I just wanted to weigh in a little bit on what Sean was saying. Sean and I was on a conference call just this morning. We are both a part of Chester Clergy, a association of pastors. We said Chester, but I think it's inclusive of Chesterfield County. And from that gathering this morning as pastors and leaders, we understood and we came to a conclusion that sometimes we just don't know. And I think that it's important for the audience, for parents that's watching, and for all of us to just agree that sometimes we just don't know. And that vulnerability sometimes creates an atmosphere for conversation. and we did not get here overnight. We did not get here over the last 4 years. We did not get here over the last 10 years. It has been an evolution. And this is just a time where it seemed to have kind of spearheaded. But as we come to grip with the fact that we don't know, pastoring in a pandemic, no one told us how to do that. Raising kids in a pandemic, no one told you how to do that. So we don't know, but we can come together and make small steps. Another hat that I wear in my life is that I'm a marriage and family therapist, and John probably seen my face. We're part of a association of community providers all throughout the state of Virginia, and I serve on the board in that. And we see that over and over again, that this vulnerability that's needed to be communicated to our communities and to our parents, and then we can come together and make small steps and then celebrate the small steps, because the small steps tell us that we're on our way somewhere, and somewhere different, hopefully, and somewhere better.
Betsy, as a leader of youth development in the community, can you talk to us again about the programs and services that the YMCA is offering to help youth navigate during these times right now?
Yes, I sure can. So we're doing a couple things. We are partnering with the school systems. One of them, of course, is Chesterfield, to offer childcare while students are out of school. So if they're in school 2 days, we have them the other 3 days. And then we do have some students who are going 5 days virtual. So we have Student Success Center set up at our Y while we are helping students get online, and then providing enrichment activities in the afternoon. And so when schools said they were going to go 100% virtual, we said, how can we help families who have to go to work? Emergency personnel, emergency care. We had no intention of even trying to replace a school system, but we thought, what are the gaps that we can maybe help fulfill around socialization, that where we can social distance and follow protocol. And so the enrichment activities we have coming in have been able to provide that. We have things like art, jump roping, STEM, just anything to get the kids' mind and feel a little piece of success and what they're doing in goal setting. The other thing that has really been enlightening is just the conversations and activities we've been able to do with our teens. We've still been able to do our Leaders Club program and Achievers program. A lot of it is virtual. But the conversations that we've been able to set up in education, we have been able to do with them around healthy conversations, around conflict resolution, has been extremely enlightening. And a couple of themes, I had opportunity to talk with the teens a little bit about what was going to be happening tonight, and just some of the common themes you're seeing with teens these days is number one, wanting to be able to show up to be their authentic self. A lot of teens are scared to do that right now. For fear of being judged or for safety reasons. And then another thing they've really talked about is teach me how to put my values into action. They see the world out there and they see people out there protesting in a peaceful manner and being advocates for what they believe in. And it's very inspirational to see them want to learn how to do that. So we've been able to step in to those areas with our teens to really help them move forward.
Jennifer, mental health has definitely been a huge theme and concern within 2020. How is Chesterfield County Schools providing services or support to help everyone navigate and make sure their mental health is priority?
So yeah, at the start of the program, I mentioned the advisory blocks that we have at the secondary level and the social emotional learning curriculum that we have at elementary and the checkpoints that we have throughout the week to make sure that our students are okay. We are also working very closely with our Department of Social Services because we do get calls sometimes from parents who are in distress or emails. And we have a really tight system set up so that when that email comes in, it goes out to the right people, and we try to call the parent to make sure that they know and hook them up with a community resource. I supervise a number of offices that work with mental health, that's school psychologists, social workers, school counseling, and we have a critical incident team as well that comes together and helps schools to navigate through trying times that students may be having. Now, a lot of our students aren't in the building, so a lot of this has to be virtual. We also use our local law enforcement to do wellness checks. So that happens on a regular basis. Again, knocking on the door at 2 o'clock in the morning is not anything new to us because we've got to make sure our babies are okay. And our parents are appreciative of it. That gives an opportunity to build that relationship. So we're really working closely to make sure that the whole family is doing okay. Again, just as I mentioned earlier, we've got to look at the whole family, and that's what we do in schools. We have over 64,000 kids, and we've got to make sure that the caretakers of those children are well. So we try our best to connect them with community partners and resources as best as they allow us to. And then when we see our kids on camera, we take attendance and make sure that they are engaged, so we count that as a day of present. And we ask them to turn their cameras on, but we also know that sometimes they don't have to, so it's not a requirement. Because if they don't want to be seen, they don't want to be seen. So we recognize that, but we also want to know that if we haven't seen you in a few days, we need to call home to see how you are. Again, you didn't know how to pastor in a virtual setting. We're trying to learn it as well, and we don't want to become experts because we want to get back in school. But it is definitely a marathon, not a race.
Pastor Franco?
Yeah, I would just say, as part of the Social Services Board, and when I was chair, one of our strategic initiatives was building a better relationship and a more effective relationship with our school system that does so much of the wellness care of students and families in amazing capacities. I mean, principals, administration, teachers, you are absolutely our heroes. We can't begin to tell you how much we appreciate you and all the things you do for our students. And just to reiterate, in social services with the school system, there's just a network of resources that are there for you, and just want to encourage you that it's just a healthy thing sometimes to build that bridge. And you can ask any teacher, and they'll start leading you on the right path.
Please.
Thank you for that. I know they appreciate it. I will tell you that with all that I've mentioned, there are still emails and phone calls from principals saying we're not doing enough. So, and I say that because we hold each other accountable, and there is a constant and consistent conversation of we've got to do more for our families and our kids. We've got to get to our kids. And I don't know what the perception is of us in the community, but I wanted to say that because our principals and teachers, and we were in a 3-hour principal meeting today, talking about inequities and talking about our kids and how they need us. And we're striving so hard to meet their needs. And just not to toot our own horn, but just to say that our principals and our teachers are the biggest advocates. And they're letting us know if we're doing it right or not. And I appreciate that, and I just want our community to understand that we're
you
going to
don't have
exhaust
to
our
toot your own
measures.
horn. I know several of our principals, and I am incredibly grateful, impressed. I mean, and I'm just telling you, they are caring for the whole student. They are advocates for our community, and they absolutely are in it to win it for our kids. And so we should be very grateful for what we've got in our school system that is making sure the heart is not lost in everything that's going on.
We're just going to tag. We're just playing
Tag
tennis. We're
team.
just playing
Go back
tennis.
and forth.
But also, one of the things we were talking about is our communities and making sure that we're not divisive. And our principals have done a tremendous job, even in a virtual setting, to bring their kids to the table, the virtual table, to have conversations. The equity teams that they're having, the courageous conversations they're having. A student is here now of a school that the principal is just kick the door down, let's talk about it. And I'm proud of that, to say that I work with colleagues who are courageous leaders and that they know that I've got to get to my kids and talk to them so that when they come back in the building, they are okay with having these conversations. In school system, we create critical thinkers. We create opportunities for kids to challenge each other in a very respectful manner. Our kids are attuned to that. So the social media thing that we're talking about now, it's awkward for them, for many of them, because they're used to really going toe-to-toe in a debate setting to have a conversation and dialogue. They're taught to do that. So I just want to give kudos to our principals and our teachers who actually have kids come into their space and have challenging conversations without a lesson plan, because that's just what they want to talk about. Our counselors who are able to have sessions and restorative practice where you're actually engaging in conversation that is hurtful, but then at the end you're healing. In my job and what we do every day, this is what we do. So to know that our community may not be there is concerning, but I'm hopeful. And I am hopeful that our children can actually probably be the models for our adults in how to do this the right way.
Okay, well, I think that was a great segue. I'm going to do a roundtable to have any last words. But again, we want to have a message of hope. We don't want to end with just, we know we have problems that we're trying to navigate to. We want to get to solutions. So, Caden, I'm going to start with you. What would be your message of hope as we leave this conversation?
Even though it's hard right now, I know I can speak for the Chesterfield area. It's a nice community, and I know that if we keep pushing forward, we can get through this.
Betsy?
So this is echoing a little bit on what Jennifer and Pastor Sean said. It's been a community effort, and to see the community rally around the students and the children and the families to help and support in whatever way they can. Like one thing I'm totally amazed at is just the personal touch that the teachers are able to give these families, like the phone calls, the emails, even at our Ys when we are helping the students with virtual learning, they're calling us, to say, hey, the parent has reached out, can we call the Y? Well, yes, you can, what are we missing, what can we do better? And so I just feel that rally response of a community coming together to support the families is what gives me hope.
Pastor Taylor?
First of all, I just want to thank the YMCA and the Chesterfield County Public Schools for allowing this event to happen. My second thank you is for my three sons that matriculated through Chesterfield County, and all three of them are doing very well. And I attribute it to maybe some of you may have touched one of them somewhere down the road. So I am a believer in Chesterfield County Public Schools, and I am very optimistic and I feel very positive about where we're going with the commitment that we see here around this table, and to the many other thousands of administrators, teachers, bus drivers, cafeteria workers, all of that team that makes this work, that runs the ship. I'm positive with this effort, continued effort, and commitment that we'll get through this pandemic, and I'm hopeful that we'll actually be better off once we get through this. Thank you.
John.
I think we need to focus on what's strong, not what's wrong. Focusing on what's wrong is only good as it helps us make an action plan for changing it. But the fuel that we use, what we use to fuel that action plan is the what's strong. We don't have the opportunity to be around the people that we want to and share hugs and handshakes and things like that. But I can reach out to my boss across town just as easily as I can reach out to my grandmother across the country and sit in the same Zoom meeting. Not the same Zoom meeting. I don't invite grandma to my boss's meeting. But we can connect in all sorts of different ways. We need to lean into relationships and lean into what's healthy. Like we talked about before, we need to role model that for others. And we need to be grateful for what we have. Gratitude is for today and hope is for tomorrow. We need to be hopeful for things that are down the road and not in a it's better than, or at least it's not as bad as, but in a sincere, what I'm thankful for today and what I'm hopeful for tomorrow. And that's how we can lean into the resilience that Jennifer was talking about earlier.
Jennifer.
Well, first, I want to say thanks for inviting me to be a part of the discussion. I never shy away from chatting. But I'm also thankful, and I think this is a time to be thankful, to being a part of Chesterfield County Public Schools. We are a very large school division, but we have been given a directive from our school board of what they will and will not tolerate. And that also comes from our superintendent and our cabinet. And it's trickled down. And we've just got to get our kids on board. And I know that they are going to be the change that we need. And I'm going to remain hopeful. I can't come to work every day if I'm not. I have, a good friend of mine, we have hashtag Change the World, that our supervisors gave us a little plaque for that, and that was way before COVID. But as educators, we come in every single day, whatever role we're in, knowing that we can impact the lives of someone else. And I just hope that our parents understand that we have to partner together to create the next set of community members that's going to take Chesterfield to the next level. And the only way to do that is to eliminate hate. I mean, that's it. Just eliminate it. Because we've got to make the world better for our youth and leave a legacy that they can say we fought hard for them. Just like my parents fought hard for me to be in this space and time right now. So I'm hopeful for Chesterfield. I'm hopeful for our nation. And I will do any and everything I can. I know our division will, to make sure that our kids, when they come back, all of them come back face to face, that it will continue to be a very safe environment. But this conversation will continue outside of platforms like this. It will continue because we've got to continue to educate our kids to be better.
That's great. I would just like to look at the camera and for everybody who's watching or will watch, two things. One, you are not alone. So please don't believe that. You are not alone. And number two, you are way more important than you think. You are way more important than you think. And you are important not because you've done it right, not because you have a lot of strength, not because you're positioned maybe the way you would hope for. You're important because as that adult in the student's life, you have the ability to model healing, recovery. You have, where people are talking about, you have an opportunity to model hope by saying, I can take a step. And so I just want to encourage you. That's what this is about. This is what the school system and our community, the Y, and so many others, our churches, our other faith communities, there is community for you. And you are more important to that community and to your household or to that mentee that you have than you realize. You've got so much influence, and it's not because you've done it all right. It's because you have the chance to take a right step. And so if you will just remember that And boy, I think a great step would be, if you've got a question, if there's a need, you've heard that there are resources, why not take a step and just leave a comment and reach out to a teacher or someone, say, hey, I could use a little help. And they're going to be there for you. And also, I think the action step of sharing with a young person, what did I learn tonight? There was I was listening, and I think I heard something tonight that was so important. Again, I want to be mindful. Obviously, we got a lot of students listening, and what Jennifer and so many of others have said, you are hardwired to be a generation that's together. I mean, what we're fighting over, you're like, why? What's going on? I mean, you've got the ability. You've already come together in so many settings, and just want to encourage you. We need you. Your voice is very, very important. I love what Betsy said about we can help you model how to advocate, how to be part of reform, and you absolutely can be part of that. So just want to encourage you. You're not alone, and you're absolutely more important than you understand. And I hope you'll have the joy of taking some sort of tangible step to say, I am going to move forward.
Excellent. Well, thank you to all of our panelists. This has definitely been a wonderful and timely conversation. I know I have learned a lot, and I definitely listened, and will have it as a takeaway. Thank you for everyone who tuned in for tonight's event. The meeting has been recorded and will be posted on Chesterfield County's Facebook page as well as their YouTube channel. We will also make sure we post resources for parents and caregivers, again, should they want to have this conversation within their homes and within their communities. Thank you again, everyone. Stay safe and have a happy holiday season.